All right, I think the trickle has died down, so I think we can go ahead and jump on in. Just please keep those intros coming in the chat. It is great to see how everyone's coming from and what brings them here. I am Kat. I use she, her pronouns. I'm on Piscataway land, known as Washington, D.C. And my organizer superpower is logistics and operations. I love to get into those nitty gritty details. And I am staunchly a stubborn climate optimist. I believe in people power and that together we can change the systems that we as a society are collectively building. So thank you to all the people who are introducing themselves in the chat. It's so great to read where everyone's coming from and what brings them here. If you have not yet, feel free to click on those links in the chat to look at where you are from. We're going to dive a little bit more into the land acknowledgement in a bit. And there's also a link to a workshop, a worksheet that you can use throughout this workshop series to take notes and also start planning your concrete action, which we're going to do in a little bit. A little bit about housekeeping. So please do stay muted when someone else is talking. We want this to be collaborative and interactive, but we do always want to be respectful of one another. If you have questions or comments, please do write them in the chat and we'll try to get them. Isha is helping me tech and do moderation today. So we'll be helping however we can, and we'll try to get to everyone's questions throughout the course of the workshop. If we don't answer a content question straight away, it'll probably be that we're going to get to that in a little bit or in the course of the workshop. So please be patient. And in general, just please be respectful in the chat. We're a small group. We all want to learn and do things together. And then if you do need closed captions, you can enable those by clicking the button at the bottom of the screen. All right. So we are going to start off with a land acknowledgement and grounding. Normally, this is done in the intros, as we were talking about, where I was like look at what land you're on, but I do want to dive a little bit more into what it is and why we do it. So it's going to have its own agenda item. Then we're going to talk about what Friday's Future is and what sets it apart, run through the general steps for planning an action, the different types of actions, and then you're actually going to start planning your own action. And then we're going to wrap it up and look at next steps. So a land acknowledgement, as I said in my intro, I am currently on Piscataway, Nocchocton, and Acostan land. If you have not done so, I encourage you to go to native-land.ca and look up your own location. So a land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous people and their traditional territories. We say this at the beginning of workshops to honor them and ground ourselves, but it doesn't really mean anything if it's just words that we say to check a box. So to recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory you reside on, and a way of honoring the Indigenous people who have been living and working on the land from like time immemorial. So it's important to understand the long-standing history that has brought you to reside on the land and seek to understand your place within that history. Land acknowledgements don't exist in like past tense or historical context because colonialism is a current ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness and of our present participation. Because we're not going to solve the climate crisis within the systems that led us here. We must tackle climate change, but do it as a part of a systemic overhaul and like rethinking how we think, right? What do we take for granted? What do we find is normal? So land acknowledgements are a reminder to take those next steps and learn more about Indigenous ways and just different ways of thinking in general to broaden your horizon and learn things that you did not know that you did not know. So yeah, it's a step that helps us acknowledge the racism and oppressive forces in our society and how we're part of it, whether we want to be or not. Because if we're not part of the solution, then we're part of the problem. So this is a reminder to take the first step in changing our own mindset to break those barriers down, which is continual work. And that might sound like some big abstract goal that you're too small to make a difference in, but it's attainable through a mix of everyday actions that you do for yourself, collective actions you do within your community, and then the systemic changes we all bring about together. And so each of those three buckets has two tracks. The physical things that we do and use, and then the mental, psychological, spiritual attitudes and beliefs that we all have. And of course, the boundaries are fluid and they influence each other. So for instance, individual physical changes are like turning off the lights and using less plastic. But even if I am dead set on using less plastic, when I go to the supermarket, it is really hard to avoid using plastic because we live in a system that doesn't really give me many alternatives. And even if I have the resources to avoid plastics, that's not going to be enough to stop the industry from producing so much plastic and not giving me the alternatives. But if a bunch of us collectively all demand companies stop using so much plastic, we can change what's accessible to individuals, which is then that systemic change, so that those individuals can make the real choice to stop using plastics. And so it's more accessible to more people to stop using plastics, so the more people are going to move away from using plastics, so the companies are going to stop producing so much plastic, so it's going to make it more accessible for people to use less plastic, and so on and so forth, and that wonderful feedback loop. And what those actions are, right? Like not wanting to use plastic, turning off the light, and how much I'm going to do that. Like, what are my hurdles? How much am I going to do these things? How important are these things to me? Which things do I think about doing, right? Those are influenced by my mindset. So how much do I think about where things came from and where they'll go once I'm done with them? Because there is no way they're going to go somewhere. Right? Do I see myself as using these inanimate things that just happen to be on this earth? Or do I see myself as part of this larger system? What is the threshold for things to galvanize me into action? What are the things that we can talk about in normal conversation? Like, why is it awkward to talk about climate change most of the time, but it's completely normal to talk about the imminent war in Ukraine, even though climate change is going to impact so many more people, right? This is the individual mindset shift that I was just talking about in the land acknowledgement, where I need to question how my mindset is shaped by the system that I live in and how much of that I actually agree with. And then when I go out and talk to people about it, I find that so many more people think the same way that I do and care deeply about saving the earth. We just feel powerless to swim against the system by ourselves, which is, by the way, an intentional design. We could dive more into that some other time, or else we'll never get to the actual strike planning, but one of my favorite rants. But my point is that we can change what normal is. Where it's normal to be an advocate for the earth instead of the exception makes it easier for me to be an advocate, which makes it so that more people are going to do it, right? Which means that it'll become more normal, which means that more people are going to do it, right? And that change, that feedback loop. And that tipping point, by the way, of getting like the systems to change and shifting norms, it's only about 3.5% of the population, right? Being a climate activist feels like we have to change everything and reach everyone, but we really only have to reach 3.5%, which is still a little bit more than 11 million people, but it's much more attainable than having to change everything everyone does. And the gorgeous thing is that we need people in all areas, right? We need them right where they are. There are things everyone can do in their everyday lives. The more people do something, the more people do something, right? The less people we need to do a lot. Simple math. So we know that every action that you do and every person that you influence, be it just planting a seed of change in their mind, right? You are helping build up to that tipping point of social change. 1 second, we're just going to let some more people in. All right. Right. Okay. So that seeding and that bringing about that mindset shift and that talking to people, that right there is being an activist. You don't have to like chain yourself to a tree for 3 days, get arrested, or be a bunny hugger, though if you're highly encouraged to if you want to. But the point that I'm trying to make is that being an activist means looking at myself and my everyday life with an open mind for what needs to change and being creative on how we change that together. Right? It's making the issues of the climate crisis a priority in my everyday life and fighting it at every move that I can, whether that's big or small. And one of those base actions that we can use for this is the strike. So in this workshop and in this workshop series, we're going to start at the very beginning, assuming that you've never organized a strike, and we're going to walk through the steps from beginning to end. In this basic series, we're going to do that for small actions, anywhere from you by yourself to a few hundred people. And then we're going to have an advanced series, hopefully, where we'll expand on each one of these topics for larger strikes. But as we're going to get to in a second, larger does not actually have to mean better. And what you're going to find is that this is all logical thinking and making connections. There's no activist degree, right? It's not to say that it's easy, but it is simple. We are all just coming together and figuring it out as we go. And that is the definition of grassroots, right? It sounds cheesy, but everyone can be an activist. It's logical thinking and making connections, and then most importantly, getting up and actually doing it. And when a bunch of us do that together, that's what makes us powerful. And that's why FFF has grown so quickly, because it is people coming together in their communities in simple ways to voice their call for climate action. At FFF, we center and educate youth in MAPA, which is most affected people in areas or frontline communities, as they are the biggest stakeholders in the future we create. And because of that, we draw people into the climate movement by providing space and resources for new activists and emphasizing accessible, simple, low-risk actions. And one of the most important elements is that these are consistent, sustained actions. Many people started by doing it every week, right? Because every org is going to have a large action every once in a while. But we keep showing up. We keep putting the climate crisis in people's minds. We're not a trend that's going away. Historically, this was through strike as the action form, right? That kept these barriers to entry low. We have no violence, no property damage, low risk, no littering, no profit from these actions, no hate, right? And we just tap into our humanity and our love. We're respectful to others, and we just live those humanitarian basics. That being said, there's no one right way of doing climate activism and no one right set of values. There are so many great orgs out there because each one speaks to a different set of people, which is exactly what we need, right? We need to get to reach as many people as possible. So as long as we're all in the same big ecosystem together, fighting for the same thing, each org has their own niche, right? With their own specialty, talking to their own like specific set of people. And so for FFF, this has historically been in the niche of organizing safe actions that have targeted a broad number of youth. But we are all working together, and the boundaries kind of between the orgs are fluid. Activists are in multiple different spaces. We're all like working on campaigns together and different projects. So people who are like, for instance, willing to risk a little bit more, they can go to other orgs that have higher risk actions, or people who want to try out something else, who want to have a very special focus area or want to try out a different type of action, right? We all work on these actions together so that we can all experience different action types and theories of change to find out where I want to fit in most. And then we have that diversity of actions and theories of change that we need. So as we dive into the specific actions now, remember that we are talking about one action form from one perspective here in this workshop, and that we need that diversity to be effective and reach as many people as possible, and that we fit into this larger climate movement so that we all can do our individual thing, knowing that together we're having that large effect, and not each one of us has to do these things, each of these things individually. Real quick though, before we dive into those various action forms, I want to sketch out the rough steps for planning an action, since each of these steps can have an influence on the type of action you want to do or how you want to implement that action. So these are rough steps. It's an iterative process. That means that you're probably like, as you're going through each step or like each phase, you're going to have to like go back and revisit and see these things, but just like general rough steps here. We've got picking the type of action. So that's what we're going to go to in a second, right? Do I want to march, a rally? Do I want to sit? Right? Like what kind of action I want. And then what is my strike story? What are my demands? What's my narrative? Why am I doing this? And why should other people care and join me? Right? I'm going to make my strike visual. What is that message that I want to get across? What is it that I'm going to write on my banners or on my signs, right? What is the image that I want to portray? How do I want to come across? And then I'm going to build people power. I'm going to get people to join me either in organizing, to attend my strikes, right? To amplify my messages on social media, wherever it is that I'm going, or in the press and the media in general, and all the while then navigate safety. So roughly on a timeline, this is going to be like for instance, now we're going to be like, all right, I'm going to do this thing. March 25th, there's the global climate strike. I'm going to take part. I have no idea what to do, right? That's where we're going to start. And that's the day, like that's the let's do this thing mark. And this is where you're going to start off doing the picking the type of action, start thinking about your narrative, your demands, what you want to look like. And then once you have that like rough estimate, at least of the direction that you want to go, right? You're going to start reaching out to people, getting organizers involved. And then once you have that base set, you kind of have your vision of what you want your strike to look like, right? Then you're going to be ready to tell the world. And that's when like the mobilization phase starts, where you're going to be posting on social media, you're going to be telling the press, you're going to be like putting up posters and doing all the fun things. And then it's going to be that day and you're going to do the thing and you're going to have the action. And then it's really important, which is one of the reasons why I put this on, is that it doesn't stop there, right? We're going to use the energy and the mobilization and all the attention that we've generated for this action to carry us forward. So the people that we've mobilized, we're going to try to pull into our next actions or have at least channels so that we can reach them again and tell them the next time that we're going to do something. So after the action, we're going to clean up, debrief, wrap up, and then really important, because this is hard work and it's really taxing and self-care is really important, we're going to take a break. Hopefully you'll get to the point where there's multiple people on the team so that y'all can kind of take turns taking a break, but it is really important to do self-care. We can only do this work and we can only give to the world if we ourselves are full. So taking the time to rest, find joy, right, in this hard work, that is in itself a form of protest in our current system. So make sure that that little aspect does not go undone. And then we're going to dive straight into the next prep and start the whole process all over again. And hopefully it'll be an ever growing cycle. As you do this a few times and as you grow your network and tap into existing ones. All right, so as we move forward, the point of all of this is logical thinking, right? None of this is rocket science. And while experience helps, everyone can do this. We need change in all aspects of society. So looking around with an open, questioning mind is the most important part. So for the rest of the workshop, we're going to look at that step one of picking your type of action. There are many types of actions. So broadly, they can be categorized into violent and non-violent, and then further into passive and direct. And as we were saying in the Fridays for Future Values, like we're going towards, we want the non-violent one. And we're going to be talking about the strike, which I see as one of the basics of nonviolent direct action, since it's an easy way to get started and so incredibly versatile, right? But there are many, many different types of actions. I've listed just a few here. There's actually a list of 198 methods of nonviolent action that I can drop into the chat in a little bit, so that I encourage you to look through that if you're ever in need of inspiration. Let me just drop that in right now. There you go. So yeah, there's just a few of those listed here. And as I said, we're going to dive into the strike one, which is super versatile. And you can just like do it, decide on when and where, and suddenly in like a different element, and suddenly you have a new action form, a new action format. So real quick before we go into that though, the question is why, right? Nonviolence, as the name implies, is a person or group working together to enact change in a nonviolent manner. And so because violence creates violence, right? And that's going to entrench people in their ways of thinking by necessity or by human behavior, while peaceful resistance changes hearts and minds. It's much more inclusive, and we can include children, disabled, those that aren't as outgoing, the ones that are less risk takers, right? People who feel needed and wanted will engage if they can. So the lower the barriers of entry, the more people that we can kind of take and activate, which then leads to that 3.5% that we need, right? We'll have people from all parts of society who can reevaluate how they live their lives and help us rethink our systems by exposing those underlying tensions, pressuring the status quo of our power systems. We can create decision dilemmas where it's the people, as I was saying earlier, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So those people who are just living their lives, not helping, not questioning the system, right? They're keeping that status quo going. So if we put them in places where they have to make that decision for themselves and they're confronted with a choice and with the facts without being forced into this thing where they feel like it's just like either a violent act or like something that they did against their will, then they're not going to be as willing to engage and maybe only do the bare minimum that they need to get out of that situation. So what we want to do is raise awareness and change public perception. Right. And while we do that, instilling principles of democracy and by doing actions like this, it's hard to disrupt the movement as a whole, but we can be as disruptive to the systems, right? That's the beauty in finding the creative ways of walking around with an open mind and being like, where can we kind of prick people to raise awareness and to wake up? So examples can be things like marches, rallies, sit-ins, posters, banners, hunger strikes, shoe strikes, right? Like all the things from that other slide a second ago. And just real quick, on this side right there, the arrow is just to kind of show if I ever say like green action or red action. I've been trying to say high and low risk, but green actions are ones with lower risk, which inherently mean that lower barrier to entry is what I was just talking about. And then high risk being the ones that have the higher barriers to entry or red actions. And those are oftentimes doesn't have to be, but oftentimes the ones that are more towards the violent side. So, because all of these actions are in a spectrum, like it's very hard to put things in direct boxes because oftentimes depending on how you do them, they're going to be different, but in general, right, like the higher risk is going to either be higher risk to my personal safety, my physical safety, depending on what my factors are, right? Deportation, if I get arrested or not, that might be more or less dangerous. So yeah, those are called red actions. And so oftentimes violence, right, those are the ones that are then called riots, that use violence, destruction, or intimidation to incite change. But that is that forced change that I was talking about that we don't want. But unfortunately, we do have to mention it because while we strive to create those safe spaces, unfortunately, there are times where other people can come in and create a violent situation out of it. So that's just a plug to join the Navigating Safety workshop. That's also one of these where we'll dig deeper into those measures. But yes, we strive to be on the green action, low risk, low barriers to entry, mobilize as many people as possible. But no matter what action form you choose, larger does not have to mean better, right? It doesn't always need to be a massive protest. Actions can be powerful with a small amount of people, including one person, right? The point is efficacy. How do we reach the most people together? Not you individually. How do we reach the most people together? So that can be a lot of small individual actions, right? Especially with today's technology, just like scrolling through feeds, seeing all of these people doing this on the same day or at the same time, or in general, like, you know, we can collage these things and show that we're all doing this thing together, and this is again where consistency comes in. When someone sees you doing something for the 20th time, they're going to be like, whoa, this person's like truly committed to this thing. And it makes them think about it every single time, right? And the more people are forced to engage with our concern about the climate crisis, the closer they are to understanding the urgency without us forcing it on them and them acting out of that place of fear or guilt, right? Which is not nearly as strong. And this can then organically lead to larger things. For instance, the global climate strikes that we do, right? We have those consistent actions to build up pressure and show that we're here, but then we have these large actions where we all come out and have big strikes together, and these sustain momentum, right? They demonstrate the large number of concerned individuals, that we're not just some like random people who like want to spend our Fridays striking, right? And there's just a few of us. We get public attention with them, and then we draw people in who can then start doing those consistent actions to build that kind of show that how many of us are here for the long haul, and that how many of us care deeply about the climate crisis, right? So we need that mix of actions, the mix of action types as well as action sizes. And that's the beauty of being part of a climate movement, right? Even if we're sitting physically alone, you're not alone, which is why community building is so important, why like it's so much so beneficial to join a network, to connect with others who are doing the same thing in your physical location, yes, but also just across the world, especially in this tech age where we can show how we're doing the things together from all over the place. And that also means that it's easy for you to get started, right? You can start small, start conversations and have actions in areas that you feel comfortable. There are actions that you can do that aren't going to get you in trouble, that you don't even have to skip school for if you really don't want to, right? The trick is to leverage each type of action's pros and pick the variables depending on what fits best into your situation. So for instance, if I don't want to skip school, I want to do in-school actions, many schools are like ever more open, and it's up to you whether you go to your school that day or walk out or skip for the day. You can talk to your principals and teachers ahead of time and ask them to support you, especially if you add an element of education, because we put emphasis on listening to the science and uniting behind the science. Oftentimes teachers or parents or principals are going to be sympathetic and even encouraging. You can also put up posters in your school, right? You can do a drop-off strike where on Fridays you sit in front of your school during the morning drop-off in a visible location. You can do, and if they don't allow that on the grounds, you can do it right before the grounds of the school, right? You can do a silent strike where you go to school, but you don't talk during the day, right? And every time someone tries to talk to you and you either have like a sign or a whiteboard or something, they're forced to confront, why is she not talking today? What is it like? What is it about like this thing that makes it so important? She's willing to go all day without talking, right? It's not going to get you in trouble. And it's just like a small inconvenience that forces people to confront the climate crisis. Right? You can do a lunch strike where you sit somewhere with a sign during lunch or carry it around with you. There's a group that does that where there's just a few people from Fridays for Future, like technically in the school, and they bring signs and just like give them to people to hold in their school and take a picture and post it on their Instagram, on the local group's Instagram. And that that's a few seconds where people feel special, they're suddenly involved. They're like, oh, okay, like, why am I holding the sign and what does it say? They get like spotlit on an Instagram account, right, from a local group. So there's ways to engage people that aren't going to, get you in trouble or like cause you to do something that you don't want to. It's all about efficacy and doing things in the locations that you have access to. And then oftentimes, like I said, if you're talking to your teachers or other adults, they can offer spaces like discussing the climate crisis in the classroom, right? The climate crisis is such a pervasive issue that it can fit into almost every subject. You can do things to, you can do more passive, like if you think back to that, like strikes are more on the active side. If you don't feel comfortable doing those yet and want to work your way up to that kind, you can also do more passive things like petitions, educational campaigns, where you can ask to maybe speak in front of your class for a while or bring something in, right? Or pull other people in, bring in people who are more comfortable speaking in front of others. Maybe there's a scientist or someone in your community who'd be willing to come in and talk. And then, as you go and you do these things, that you're going to start getting people's attention and bringing people in. So basically, the FFF basic strike, just to get started, you've never done anything like this before, you don't have anybody else that you know who wants to join you, right? Pick a spot and a time. You don't have to skip school, just get creative and be somewhere where it's going to get attention. Make your sign so that people know why you're doing it, or choose a different consistent symbol if you don't want a sign, but a sign is normally the easiest and the most, the clearest. Then do your thing, carry out the action. Even if you're doing your action alone, but the most important part then is to spread the word. So like take a picture and tag FFF-US so that we can then amplify, and then you can meet others, ask your friends, even if they don't want to sit there with you, like, to spread the message, to post on their own socials or tell their friends about it. And then next time, maybe, ask your friend to join you, show them that it's not that hard, or it's actually fun and it's engaging. And then, right, success is not based on how many people show up, and that takes the anxiety out of it. You don't have to, like, for instance, thinking of the next global strike for people who have already started a local group and don't have as many people there to come in. It doesn't always need to be a march or a rally, right? Pick a spot, tell people to be there, take your sign, and then take pictures and then amplify it, right? Success is not based on how many people show up. It's the mix that makes us strong. And there are a lot of people out there who want to get engaged. We just need to start connecting. Oftentimes people are just afraid to take that first step alone. But once someone speaks up, they're ready to engage. So we can work up to the big strike and leveraging your community, right? You can connect with people in your physical localities. There's other groups and orgs that are doing things. And that I also would suggest going to their strikes and actions so that you can kind of see how others are doing it. There you're going to meet people who are inherently interested in these things, right? And then also join networks, as I've been saying, that are not in your physical location. So for instance, anybody here who's not already started a local group, you are more than welcome to start a Fridays for Future local group. And if you're doing it within the US, we within Fridays for Future US would love to help you do it, right? The point is that what we try to do is we try to build a network of people so that you can all there's so many people, like you get connected to the people who are doing the same things you are, you learn from one another, you support one another, and then we can bundle resources. And so for instance, for this next global strike, we just ordered stickers all together, right? Which are things that are really hard to do on your own. But if you're a local group and then you're connected, we can bundle resources. It gives you like a legitimacy, basically. So that if people are like, oh, why is this person just like sitting on the side? Be like, well, especially if you're doing it on a time, like a day like the 25th, you'd be like, well, there's like millions of other people doing this all across the world. Like you're the one that's that's not participating, right? Yeah, and then through that we gain access to new opportunities and make new friends. So if you're looking for like to connect and to help, then you can always contact us. But in general, like, because Fridays for Future, anybody who aligns with the vision and values can be Fridays for Future. So you don't have to, but we are here to support. So that was a lot. Now, I kind of threw everything at you in terms of theory and abstractness. Now it's up to you. We dropped a link to a worksheet into the chat. I can drop it in again. If you could go in and make a copy, and we are going to give 5 minutes for everyone to go ahead and plan their next strike. So I'm going to, one second, drop the link, or actually, Isha, could you drop the link to the worksheet? That would be awesome. Thank you. And so, okay, so real quick, the steps. We are going to pick the type of action, right? Which in this case, and if you have a strike that you're thinking about doing, you can go ahead and you can do these things for whatever your action it is that whichever strike you're planning on doing next. If you don't know when and what, then just use March 25th as kind of the event that you have here. In that case, it's actually going to be easier for you because the narrative and the hashtag and stuff is already set. But basically, we're just going to take 5 minutes to kind of start running through each one of these, start thinking through each one of these steps. And then, yeah, you won't be able to fill it all out because each one of these, right, is its own workshop that's going to be coming up. But we're going to kind of see and cover the basis, and then especially diving into questions around the type of action. So you're going to start off by deciding what kind of action it is that you want to do, then thinking about the narrative and the demands, right? Like, we are youth demanding change, and we don't have the answers. Otherwise, like, the adults should have the answers, but we still need to have explicit demands and a clear message to rally people. So in that one, we're going to dive into the Creating Your Strike Story workshop that's coming up. And then whenever you do compose your message, right, speak for yourself and not others. So why do you care about climate change, right? What action do you want or need to see? What resonates with your community? And feel free to start small, right? Small goals. If you set yourself way up high goals, you're setting yourself up to fail. And then figure out imagery, like start thinking about imagery and graphics. Do I want a banner? Do I want signs? What hashtag do I want on them? What's that image that I'm going for? And where can I start asking around for people to join me? Where can I put up posters? Where are other places or other people might be willing to join me, and how can I get my word out there to like press or media or other public spaces? And then start thinking about what are like the logistics and the safety and like security nitty-gritty things that I need to consider.
Kat, can I interrupt you really quickly? Sorry. Just a note for the worksheet, just make sure that you're making your own copy. I think It looks like we gave edit access, and we should not have done that. So just like make your own copy of the worksheet and then you can fill it out there. Sorry about that, everyone. Thanks.
Yes, thanks. Sorry, I thought it was the, sorry, I thought I changed the settings, but definitely please make your own. All right. So real quick, I do see, please, as I'm like talking and in my zone, if you do have questions, please write them to everybody, because I cannot keep up with the chat because y'all are amazing. And if you have that question, the probability is that someone else also has that question. So just real quick before we dive in, and I finally give you all the 5 minutes. It was a question on what does it mean by type of action? And that was this, where I was talking about where in this case, right, historically, it's just like Fridays for Future uses strikes the most, and that's kind of like that basic version, the like most basic action form, because it's like the easiest, has the lowest barriers to entry, and also the most versatile, right? So like I can, right, just change up and just do it at lunch and suddenly it's a lunch strike. I can, just not talk and it's a silent strike, right? So it's super versatile and easy to do. So I can do that, but oftentimes it can also be, for instance, do I want to do a banner drop? Do I want to do a march? Do I want to do a rally, right? Those are all kind of depends on, that's why I was saying it's an iterative process that might also depend on what vibe you get, how many people are resonating, like how can you get enough organizers together, and do you think there's going to be enough people there for you to do a march or a rally? If you think that it's going to be you and hopefully a few friends, then it's going to be a strike form, and that is awesome, and that is fine, right? And that is exactly what we're here to empower people to do. So are there any more questions before we give people 5 minutes to start on their worksheet? Perfect. And someone confirmed that did not give edit access. Whew, I'm not crazy. All right, perfect. It looks like there's no more questions, so I'm going to be quiet. Probably turn on a little bit of quiet tunes. Let me know if they're too loud, and give everyone 5 minutes to start thinking about their next strike. let's see, how was that for people? How far did y'all get? Anybody have any questions? Free to pop it in the chat, or if you want to, what you can do is you can put a star in the chat if you'd like to come off mute, and let us know how it was for you. How far did people get? Do people fill out the worksheet or start on it, or at least start thinking about their next strike? Elizabeth, do you want to come off mute and let us know how it was for you?
Yeah. I thought that it was, I think that was very good, and it helped on how to organize things. If I ever were to like make another strike, I would, or not make another strike, but like if I were ever to like make a strike with my friends or whatever, I would probably use this format because it's very helpful.
All right, so you didn't plan for a concrete next strike? That's all right. I see in the chat, it's hard to pick a type of action because there are so many to choose from. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, same. And then also just if there's ever, that's why kind of like that strike is so great, right? Because it's kind of the basics, so versatile. You just pick a time and a location and your message, and you are set to go. So any other questions for like types of actions? Did anybody hit any roadblocks while trying to think? I know 5 minutes isn't very long, but same with picking type of action. Yes. But like I said, main thing then, just as we dive into the last ones, we can go ahead and jump into the wrap up then, right? Because the main thing then is basically getting the word out, just getting started, doing something. I think one of the biggest things, at least for me personally, is I always try to want to have it like perfect and like overthink things. But somebody very wise once told me the best action is the one that actually gets done. So yeah, it is fully okay, right? I'm going to screen share again, fully okay to keep it simple. Oh, we're going to skip through to the end. Right. Okay. Where did that go? Here we go. Yes, fully okay to start small. There is no need to start your activism with a large project or action, right? Simplicity, consistency are key. Never be afraid to return to the basics and keep it simple, because you are part of a large network, and together we create that necessary diversity of actions, and you don't have to do that all for yourself. And don't forget, we are all figuring this out as we go, right? There is no, as long as you align with the FFF values, there's no right way to do an action. The most important thing is that you do them and that it gets done, right? There you go. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to write me personally or FFF US. As I said, on the website, there's a form. You can see all the local groups that are in the US or within the Fridays for Future network. Just because, right, the way that Fridays for Future is, you don't, like, you can start your own local group. You don't have to do it like through the FFF US network. But what we do is that we try to come in and help you get it started. We can get you, like, for instance, in the @fridaysforfutureusa.org email address, right? Connect you with the other people who are doing who are also doing local groups in their area, bundling the resources, right, supporting one another. So that's kind of what, so Fridays for Future tries to help to kind of streamline that. But you are more than welcome to do your own thing, plan your own actions, and then let us know if you need anything, if you have any questions. And then don't forget to sign up for the rest of the workshops as we dive into each one of those other 6 elements, or the other 5 or 6 altogether, into each one of those. And that's basically it. Thank you so much for coming. I'm gonna stay on. Feel free to stay on if you have any questions, come off mute and we can chit chat for a while, but otherwise that's a wrap. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and see you at the next strikes or at the next workshops. and hopefully on March 25th.
We have a question in the chat.
Yes. Is it, okay, how can I inform a lot of people when I don't have social media? Yes, I know I can talk directly to people in my school, but it's fairly difficult when I can't use social media. I think that's one of the setbacks for me. So this is what we were talking about with doing it within your means. If you don't have social media, for one, you could try to find someone at your school who does or is allowed to use social media, and they can kind of run that for you within local groups. The point is to divide roles, right? Not everybody needs to be doing everything all the time. So if you have someone that, if you find someone, a friend, someone maybe that's in a grade that's above you, then they can help kind of run that element of it. But if that's not a thing, then it's then build your local group, your group within a community that you can reach. So a lot of groups are within schools. That is fully valid, right? Because that enables you to do things like lunch strikes or recess strikes, like the drop-off strikes that I was talking about. It means that you can talk to your principal and try to maybe get assemblies, or where you can talk to your teachers and where you can ask them to hang up posters or talk about it in class, or where you can do projects and kind of see where it fits into the curriculum. And so doing it in the smaller settings is not in any way, it actually enables you to have a larger impact. Because if you think about it, if I do a local, a strike on a citywide level, then what I can do is I can do it very much minimizes the amount of things that I can do, right? I can't do all those other campaigns. What I can do is I can tell people be here at this time, right? Or I'm gonna either stand or strike or march. And it's a lot harder to do targeted, and actually know that I'm reaching the people. So it really, this is what I was saying with the strike, the type of action really depends on the impact that I'm wanting to have and the resources that I have, how many people, are there to help me, or what access to what resources I have. Does that kind of answer the question? All right. Another one, I'm interested in joining FFF in the network, but it sounds like I might be for a younger age group than myself. Is there a recommended age range? Bye, Phoebe. So we do need everybody, right, to do this. FFF is youth-led. So there's not technically an age limit, but within groups, we do encourage those that are younger to be not only for them to actively step up, but for those that are older to create the setting and the infrastructure for those people, for the youth to feel empowered to step up and learn from that. So but then also, as I was saying before, because we are all in this ecosystem together, if FFF is not the right setting, right, we have a lot of people that support from different places. So for instance, there's other great orgs like Arm in Arm, for instance, where you could join that, and just kind of, so many activists are in multiple different orgs that we all just kind of overlap and help each other. So the names aren't really the name is not really the important aspect here. There's a lot of Fridays for Future groups, for instance, that aren't actually called Fridays for Future. As long as, we're getting stuff done and aligns with Fridays for Future values, that's the most important thing. So not technically an age. Thank you. Wonderful. Bye. Thanks for the question. All right. With uniform, seriously can't do big things. All right, so back to the question around the schools. We were saying the only problem with trying to set up things with my school is that we're a charter school. So you got uniform, can't do big things around the school. Okay, like I said, it depends on, I feel like there's things, and you, for instance, do a silent strike, put up, walk around with signs, try to talk about educational campaigns, do petitions, talk about people, do something at lunch, something like that. And then also the next question, why March 25th? So the global strike is on March 25th, and which days are picked is a process that happens on the international level, where there's a poll that goes out to all the different groups, and we kind of look to see yeah, what date most people want to do, because there's never going to be one day that kind of works for everyone across the world. So we try to find dates that work for the most amount of people, and then also vary them between the years, right? So that, for instance, if one year we do it in April around Earth Day, which is during Ramadan, and it's just bad for some people, we can do it, for instance, now in March, so that those people for whom the date was bad last year have a chance participating this time. And there's normally like 2 or 3 a year, so it's also not like there's always going to, unfortunately, there's always going to be another global strike until we fix it. All right, great, awesome. I am so happy that so many of you joined and asked so many great questions. Like I said, feel free to sign up for the next strikes, where we'll dive into each, or the next workshops where we'll dive into each topic a little bit more. And I hope to see you on those, and hope to see you at the next strikes. Let us know if you have any questions. Bye, everyone.